Lily asked her regular question before she even sat down. She came through the back door at 10:03, backpack off before she crossed the threshold. She had abandoned the arrival ritual at some point in the last few weeks. The way children abandon transitional behaviors once they have decided a place is fully safe. And she went to Bo, said his name, scratched behind his ear, and then straightened up and looked at me. She said, "Did you think about it?" I told her I had thought about it. She said, "And?" I told her to sit down first. She sat. Carol was already at the table with the cookies. The recipe fully settled now. The vanilla exactly right. The cookies understood to be both Richard's and Carol's in equal measure. Sarah was on her way, Carol had said, running about 15 minutes behind because of something with one of the children. Norma had not yet arrived, which was unusual enough that I had already registered it. Lily looked at the empty chair where Norma normally sat. She said, "Is she coming?" I told her I assumed so. She said, "Good, because one of the regular questions is about her and I don't want to ask it without her here." Carol said, "You're going to ask Norma a question?" Lily said, "About her, not to her." She paused. "Well, maybe to her, depending on the answer to the about her part." Carol looked at me. I told Carol I had some context and would explain in a moment. Lily said, "The question is whether she knows she's a door thing." Carol was quiet for a moment. She said, "I think I understand what you mean." Lily said, "I've been thinking about it since last week. How she just shows up. How she has been showing up for 3 years before any of us were here. And I don't think anyone has ever told her that the showing up mattered, that she's the reason things changed." She looked at me. "Did you tell her?" I thought about it. I had thanked Norma. I had said it directly in the kitchen, and she had told me not to, and then received it anyway, and then retreated to the coffee filter situation. But had I told her what Lily was asking about? Not thank you for being here, but you are the reason the table exists at all. You are the reason I can sit with Carol and Sarah, and you and a 9-year-old who asks not regular questions. You are the reason any of this became possible. I told Lily I didn't think I had said it in exactly those terms. She nodded, satisfied with the honesty. She said, "That's what I thought. That's the regular question. Why don't we tell the people who show up that they're the reason things got better?" She picked up a cookie. She said, "That's it. That's the whole question." What Lily's question actually contained. I want to stay with that question for a moment before I tell you about the rest of the morning, because it is the kind of question that sounds simple and is not. Why don't we tell the people who show up that they're the reason things got better? The surface answer is obvious. We assume they know. We assume the fact of our continuing to let them in, of not closing the door when they arrive with the unidentified pastry, and the opinions we didn't ask for, communicates sufficient gratitude. We assume the relationship itself is the thank you. But Lily had named something more specific than gratitude. She had asked about the causation, not, do they know I appreciate them? Do they know they are the reason? The reason things changed. The reason the 1 cup became 2. The reason the man at the kitchen table is not the same man who was at the kitchen table 3 years ago. The reason the table grew at all. Those are different things. Gratitude is backward-looking. It says, I received something from you, and I am aware that I received it. The acknowledgement of causation is something else. It says, you are the structural reason that the better thing exists. Without you, specifically, in the specific form you arrived in, this particular version of better would not have been built. It was built because you kept coming. Because you treated the showing up as non-negotiable in a way that eventually made it non-negotiable for me, too. Most of the people who function this way in our lives, who are the structural reason that the better thing was built, do not know it. Not because we are ungrateful, because the causation is invisible while it is happening. You don't notice the foundation while the building is being constructed. You notice the building, and by the time the building is complete enough to see clearly, the foundation has been under it for so long that it no longer presents itself as something that required a decision. It is simply there, has always been there. The kitchen that held 1 cup now holds 4 people, and a dog and a box of cookies, and an 8-year-old yellow Labrador with a real tail. And the woman who walked through the door on day 11 with a casserole dish and a dying plant is so woven into the fabric of what exists now that the fabric and the weaver have become indistinguishable. Norma had been the foundation. She did not know the full weight of what she had supported. And Lily, 9 years old, had identified this with the specific clarity of a child who has not yet learned to take the foundations of things for granted. Norma arrived, and what she walked into. Norma came through the back door at 10:22, which was 22 minutes later than her usual arrival, and represented, for Norma, something in the range of a significant delay. She was carrying 2 things, her bag and a small paper bag from somewhere that smelled of cinnamon. She set the paper bag on the counter. She said, "Cinnamon rolls, the real kind. Not from a can." She looked around the table. "Where's the girl?" Lily raised her hand from the floor, where she had migrated to her customary position with Bo. Norma said, "You're early." Lily said, "You're late." Norma said, "I was at the bakery." The line was long. I don't apologize for prioritizing quality. She sat down. She looked at the table. She looked at Carol and at me, and at the specific quality of the room, the attentive, slightly elevated quality that settles over a space when a conversation has been building towards something and is waiting for the final element to arrive. She said, "What?" I told her nothing. She said, "There's a what. I've known you for 22 years. You have a what face." I told her Lily had a question she wanted to get to when everyone was present. Norma looked at Lily. Lily, from the floor, without looking up. "Not yet. I want to let the morning settle first." Norma said, "The morning settle." Lily said, "That's what my mom calls it. When you come into a room and you need a few minutes before the important things to let the morning settle." Norma said, "Your mother is a sensible woman." Lily said, "She learned it from watching you, I think." Norma opened her mouth, closed it, reached for a cinnamon roll. Sarah arrived at 10:30, slightly breathless, carrying the specific energy of a woman who has been managing a school morning and a commute and a parking situation, and has still arrived within the window. She sat down, accepted coffee, took a breath, and the morning settled. What Carol told us, and what it revealed. While the morning was settling, Carol said something that had not been said at the table before, something she had clearly been holding for the right moment, and had decided this was it. She said, "Sarah and I opened Richard's journal." The table went still. Lily looked up from the floor. Carol said, "Last Sunday, we sat at my kitchen table, and we opened it together, like Dr. Carver suggested." She looked at her hands. She said, "I want to tell you what was in it. Not all of it. Most of it was his. Private. Notes about engineering problems and observations about the world and the specific detailed accounting of a man who processed things by writing them down." She paused. "But there was a section, toward the back. He called it..." She stopped, looked at Sarah. Sarah said, "He called it the good things." It was the last section in the journal. Maybe 50 pages, written over the last 10 years of his life. A list. Just a list, really, of good things. Specific ones. Small ones. She said. The first entry was, Carol laughs at my jokes even when they're not funny. She thinks I don't know she does it on purpose. I know. It's one of my favorite things about her. The table was very still. Lily had fully turned from Bo. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, looking at Carol, completely present. Carol said there were entries about Sarah, about her children, about Sunday dinners, about the drive to work that he took for 30 years, and the specific tree on the corner of 2 streets that he looked forward to seeing in the spring. She looked up. About Norma. Carol said, he wrote about you twice. Once, about 8 years ago. He wrote, Norma came over and told Carol something that made Carol laugh until she cried. I could hear it from the other room. I love that sound. I love that Norma produces that sound in my wife. She is loud, and she is much, much more than she appears. Norma was very still. Carol said, the second time was 2 years before he died. He wrote, Norma's husband Dennis is sick. She doesn't say so directly, but Carol understands and I understand. Norma came over 3 times this week. She is the kind of person who shows up when things are hard and pretends she is there for a different reason. I think this is one of the highest forms of love available to a human being. The kitchen was completely silent. Lily was watching Norma. Norma was looking at the cinnamon rolls. She said, very quietly, he wrote that. Carol said, yes. Norma said, he barely knew me. Carol said, he watched you with me for 30 years. He knew you. Norma put her hand flat on the table. Not the decisive gesture of someone about to say something, but the grounding gesture of someone who needs a surface to hold on to. She said, I didn't know he saw that. Carol said, most people don't know what they're seen doing. Norma looked at the window. She said, the highest form of love available to a human being. She said it quietly, to herself, trying out the weight of the words. I thought, this is the answer to Lily's question. This is exactly what happens when the person who shows up finds out what the showing up meant to the people it was shown up for. Not a thank you, a seeing, a full, specific, named recognition of what they were doing and why it mattered and what its presence in the world represented. Richard saw it. He wrote it down. And it arrived 14 months after his death, in a kitchen on a Tuesday morning, to a woman who had come through the back door 22 minutes late with cinnamon rolls and was not prepared for what was waiting at the table. What Norma said, and what she did with it. She was quiet for longer than I had ever seen her be quiet. Not the performing restraint quiet of someone managing their response, but the genuine quiet of a person who has received something that requires full interior attention before it can be responded to. Sarah and I and Carol and Lily sat with it. Bo lifted his head, registered the quality of the room, and put it back down. After a while, Norma said, Richard was a good man. Norma said, I didn't appreciate him enough when he was alive. I thought he was quiet. I thought quiet people were... She stopped. I thought quiet people weren't paying attention. Dennis was loud too. I understood. Loud Richard was quiet, and I assumed that meant he was somewhere else. Carol said, he was always exactly where he was. Norma said, I know that now. She looked at Carol. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Carol said, he saw you. That's what matters. Norma said, the highest form of love available to a human being. She shook her head slightly, not in disagreement, but in the specific motion of someone absorbing something that is larger than they expected. Dennis would have been insufferable about this. He would have said, "I told you, Norma. He always told me I was more than I thought I was, and I always told him he was biased because he was married to me." She paused, she said. He was right. She said it plainly, not with pride or performance, just the specific acknowledgement of someone who has received evidence that requires a revision in their self-understanding and is making the revision. Lily, from the floor, said, "Norma." Norma looked at her. Lily said, "That's what I wanted to ask you. Whether you knew you were a door thing, and you didn't, and now you do." She looked at her seriously. "How does it feel?" Norma said, "Like something I should have known sooner." Lily said, "You couldn't have known sooner. Someone had to tell you." Norma said, "Dennis knew." Lily said, "But he had to write it down because he didn't say it out loud. So you didn't know until now." Norma opened her mouth. Lily said, "That's the point of the question. That's why I asked it. Because the door things don't know they're door things, and they should." She went back to Bo. Norma looked at her. She looked at me. She said, "Ed, where did this child come from?" I told her Cleveland, according to Carol. Carol said she came from Richard. He would have asked exactly that question, and then answered it himself, before anyone else could. Norma said, "Then I loved Richard more than I realized." She picked up her cinnamon roll. She took a bite. She said, still chewing, "These are excellent, by the way. The bakery is worth the line." What I want to talk about: the people who show up. I want to spend some time on what Lily's question opened, because I think it is the most important thing this channel has addressed in 13 weeks. We have talked at length, across 12 previous conversations, about the people we love, who needed more from us than we gave them, about the mornings and the half-presents, and the husband who checked his messages instead of sitting with his wife, about the father who didn't say "I'm proud of you" for 30 years, about the man with $4 billion whose son didn't pick up the phone, about the Dennis card in the desk and Margaret's letter and Richard's notebook and all the things that were felt and not said and felt again and said too late. All of that has been about the failure of showing up. Lily asked about the other side. She asked about the people who showed up, who kept showing up, who treated the showing up as non-negotiable and maintained that treatment across years. Across the periods when the person they were showing up for was not easy to show up for. Across the management and the one cup and the newspaper that didn't get read and the garden that had lost its engine. She asked whether those people knew what they had done. And the answer, in almost every case, is no. Not because they are unobservant or because the people they showed up for are ungrateful. Because the showing up, in order to work, has to be unconditional. It cannot require the ongoing explicit acknowledgement that it is valued, because requiring that acknowledgement would change the nature of the showing up from a gift to a transaction. The Normas of the world come with the casserole and the dying plant, and they do not say, "Are you aware of what I am providing here?" They come, and the coming is the thing, and the thing requires no acknowledgement to continue. But the thing is nourished by acknowledgement. The person who shows up without condition is not injured by the absence of explicit recognition, but they are sustained by its presence. They are given additional fuel for the continued showing up, the renewed commitment to Tuesday, the decision made each week to walk through the back door and set something on the counter and sit down at the table. Richard's journal entry. She is loud, and she is much, much more than she appears. She is the kind of person who shows up when things are hard and pretends she is there for a different reason. I think this is one of the highest forms of love available to a human being. That entry did something to Norma that a simple thank you would not have done. It gave her the full picture of what had been seen. It gave her the specific, named understanding of what her presence had meant to the people it was present for. She had been operating without that picture for 30 years. She received it today, and I watched what it did to her. It did not make her louder. It did not produce the normal reaction. The pivot, the deflection, the immediate retreat into something practically specific and tonally adjacent. It produced the quiet, the hand on the table, the genuine interior recalibration of a person receiving information that requires a revision in their self-understanding. She was, for a few minutes, entirely still. That stillness was the gift being received. That is what the full acknowledgement does, that the simple thank you cannot always do alone. It produces the stillness, the moment when the person who has been operating as foundation understands, specifically and completely, what has been built on what they provided. The patient I thought about all morning. There was a woman I treated in my 28th year of emergency medicine. I will call her Barbara. She was 64 years old, and she had come in with her adult brother, who was the patient, a man named Roy, 67, who had been dealing with a serious chronic condition and whose situation had escalated to the point that required our department. Barbara had been Roy's caregiver for 6 years. This was evident not only from what she told me, but from how she was in the room. The specific, expert calm of someone who has been managing medical situations for long enough that the medical environment no longer produces anxiety. She knew the vocabulary. She knew what questions to ask and when to ask them. She anticipated the information I was going to need before I asked for it. She had been doing this for 6 years for her brother. I sat with her in the family consultation room at one point during the evening, while we waited for results that would determine the next phase of the situation. I asked her, because something about her made the question feel appropriate, how she was holding up. She said, "I'm fine." I waited. She said, "I'm tired. I've been tired for 6 years, but I'm fine." I asked if she had people who helped her. She said, "My husband, my children when they're available, a neighbor who covers Thursdays." She paused. "It's manageable." I said, "Does Roy know how much you've given him?" She was quiet for a moment. She said, "He thanks me. He's always thanked me." I said, "That's not what I asked." She looked at me. I said, "Does he know the shape of it?" The 6 years. The specific weight of what 6 years of being someone's primary caregiver while maintaining your own life looks like. Not the thank yous. The actual size of the thing he's received. She was quiet for a long time. She said, "No, I don't think he does. I don't think I've ever let him see the full size of it because I didn't want him to feel guilty. He didn't ask to be sick. He didn't ask for any of this. And I didn't want the caregiving to become a burden he carried in addition to the illness." She said, "But I think, sometimes, I would like him to know, not so he feels guilty, just so he knows what exists, what was given." I told her I understood that. I told her that the desire to be seen, fully, specifically, in the real dimensions of what you have provided, was not a request for gratitude. It was a request for the completion of the exchange. A relationship in which one person gives and the other receives, but does not fully see the dimensions of what they have received, is an incomplete exchange. Something is missing in it that both people feel, even if neither can name it, she said. How do I tell him without making it about guilt? I told her, tell him what Richard told Norma. Not, look at what I have given you and feel the weight of it, but Look at what I have given you, and understand that I gave it freely, and I would give it again. And I need you to know the dimensions of it, not so that you can repay it, but so that you can receive it fully, so that the exchange can be complete. She said, "Is that possible? To tell someone the full size of what you gave them, without producing guilt?" I told her it was possible, but it required the specific language of gift rather than the language of debt. It required saying, "This is what I chose to give you freely because you matter to me," not, "This is what I sacrificed for you, and the sacrifice has a cost." Barbara and Roy had that conversation, as far as I know. She told me several months later, when she came back to the department for an unrelated matter, that she had tried something like what I described. That Roy had cried, that she had held his hand while he cried and told him, "Not because you owe me, because you needed to know." She said, "He knew the next time I came on Thursday." I asked what she meant. She said, "He knew differently. He looked at me differently, like he was seeing the Thursday for what it was, instead of for what it wasn't, instead of seeing it as just the regular thing, the thing I'd always done. He saw it as a choice I kept making, a choice I kept making. That is what the full acknowledgement gives the person who has been showing up, not guilt in the receiver. The transformation of the showing up in the receiver's perception from something automatic into something chosen, from background into foreground, from the air into something specific and given, and worth receiving consciously. What the morning did with all of this, I want to come back to the table, because what happened in the hour after the journal conversation is the most important part of the morning. And I have been doing what I always do, approaching the center from the outside, working inward through the stories and the patience and the observations until the specific, particular thing is ready to be said. After Norma settled, after the cinnamon roll and the specific revision she was making to her understanding of herself, after Sarah arrived and heard the context and sat with the weight of it. After Lily finished her position with Bo and came to the table and took her proper seat, the signal she gives when she has decided the conversation has reached the part that requires her full, upright presence. Lily said, "I want to do something." We all looked at her. She said, "I want everyone to say the door thing for one person, out loud, the specific thing that one specific person does that they don't know matters." Carol said, "Lily." Lily said, "I'll go first, to show how it works." She looked at Carol. She said, "Grandma, the door thing you do for me is that you remember what I said the week before. Every week. You always start with something from last week. Like, last week you said you were worried about the math test. You remember things I say, and you bring them back. I didn't know that mattered to me until I started thinking about door things, and then I realized it was the most important thing." She paused. "So that's yours," she said. "Richard did that too. He always remembered what I'd said." Lily said, "I know. I think I got it from you, and you got it from him." Carol's hand came up to cover her mouth briefly. She nodded. Lily looked at Sarah. She said, "Mom, yours is harder, because I see you every day and door things are easier to see when there's some distance." She thought about it seriously. "I think yours is that you always come into my room at night even when you think I'm asleep. You don't say anything. You just come in and look at me and then leave. I've been pretending to be asleep for years because I like it." She looked at her hands. "That's yours." Sarah was very still. She said, "I didn't know you weren't asleep." Lily said, "I know. That's what makes it a door thing." Sarah said, "I'll keep doing it." Lily said, "I know." She looked at Norma. She said, "Norma, you already got yours from Richard's journal, but I'll give you mine too. Your door thing for me is that you always laugh at my questions, even when they surprise you. You never look like you think I asked the wrong thing. That makes me feel like my questions are worth asking." She met Norma's eyes. "So that's yours," Norma said. "That is the most composed speech I've ever heard from a 9-year-old. Lily said, "Thank you. I've been working on it since last Tuesday." Norma said, "It shows." She said it with the specific, direct warmth that was her actual register when the noise fell away. The register Richard had seen and written down, and that had been waiting 14 months in a journal for the right Tuesday morning. Lily looked at me. She said, "Dr. Carver, I'll do yours last because you're the one who started all of this. The door thing you do for me." She stopped, thought. "You answer the questions like they're the most important questions you've ever been asked. Even the scary ones, and the not regular ones, and the ones that are actually about me but I ask in a different direction." She paused. "That's yours. The answering like it matters." I told her it did matter. She said, "I know. That's why it's a door thing. What I said and what it produced. I want to tell you what happened after Lily completed the round." The table sat with it for a moment. Not the managed silence of a group that doesn't know what to say, the organic quiet of people who have just participated in something that requires a breath before the next thing. And then Norma said, "My turn." We looked at her. She said, "I want to do the round back, since the child started it, and it seems rude not to reciprocate." She looked at Carol. She said, "Carol, your door thing, the one I've been watching for 12 years, is that you never make people feel foolish for needing something. Not once. Not Dennis when he was sick and needed things he was embarrassed to need. Not me when I first came to your door after Dennis died and pretended I needed to borrow something. Not Richard, I imagine, on any of the hard days. You receive need without judgment. That is your door thing." Carol said very softly, "Thank you, Norma." Norma said, "Don't thank me. It's accurate." She looked at Sarah. She said, "Sarah, yours is harder because you're still building yours. But what I've watched over the last 12 weeks is that you keep showing up even when it's uncomfortable. You came to a stranger's kitchen because your mother needed the connection, and you were willing to be uncertain for her benefit. That's not a small thing. That's your door thing." Sarah said, "I wasn't sure I should come." Norma said, "That's what made it a door thing." She looked at Lily. She said, "The child's door thing is obvious. She asks the questions everybody else is afraid to ask. The world needs more of that. The world needs more 9-year-olds at tables full of people who have forgotten how to ask the obvious question." Lily said, "I'm going to be 10 in March." Norma said, "Then the world needs more 10-year-olds. My point stands." She looked at me. She said, "Ed." I waited. She said, "Your door thing is that you stayed in the house." She said it simply, without elaboration, and let it sit. I looked at her. She stayed after Margaret died. You stayed. You didn't sell the house or move closer to Claire, or do the thing that people do when a place becomes too full of a person who is gone. You stayed in the kitchen and the garden and the room with the desk and all of it, and you let us come into it." She paused. "Some people closed the house after. You opened it. That's your door thing." I had not thought about it in those terms before. She was right. Staying had been, at the time, an absence of decision rather than a decision. I had not moved because moving required more energy than I had in those first weeks and months. The staying had not felt like a choice, but Norma was right that it was one. At some point, the inertia became intention, and the house became the place I was building rather than the place I was waiting in. And the table grew because the house was available, because the door could be walked through. I had stayed. That was my door thing. I told Norma she was right. She said, "I usually am." She picked up the last cinnamon roll and offered half to Lily, who accepted it with the specific gravity of someone receiving a significant gesture. What this means for the rest of this week. I want to give you something practical before this conversation ends, because the morning was full and rich, and I am aware that richness without direction is pleasant, but not useful. The practical thing is this: the round. What Lily did, what she had been thinking about and preparing since last Tuesday, is one of the most genuinely useful things I've seen anyone do at this table in 13 weeks, and it is available to you today with the people who are in your life. Not as a formal exercise, not as a structured activity with a beginning and an ending, and a facilitator, as a conversation that happens because you decide to start it. You think about one person in your life who is your Norma, who shows up, who has been showing up, who treats the coming as non-negotiable and has never required your explicit acknowledgement of the showing up to continue doing it. You tell them their door thing, specifically in the language of what it is, rather than the language of gratitude. Not, "Thank you for always being there," but the thing you do is this, specifically, the remembering what I said last week, the coming into the room at night, the laughing at the questions, the hand on the back at every door. And it matters in this specific way. And I needed you to know, not because you'll stop if you don't hear it, but because you deserve to have the full picture of what you're doing. You give them the Richard journal entry. You say, "This is what I see when I see you. This is what you are doing that you may not fully understand you are doing. This is what the highest form of love available to a human being looks like, in your specific case, in the specific form you have found to offer it." You do not need a journal. You do not need to write it down. You just need to say it today, before another week passes in which the person who is your foundation does not know what they are supporting. The second thing, and this is for the people who recognize themselves in Barbara rather than in Norma, is the permission to tell the full size of it. If you have been someone's Thursday, someone's casserole, and dying plant, and 4 years of Tuesday, if you have been giving something that is larger than a thank you captures, and you have been giving it without the full acknowledgement being offered, you are allowed to ask for it, not in the language of debt. In the language of gift, you can say, "I want you to know the dimensions of what I've given you." Not so you can repay it, because the exchange is incomplete without your seeing it. Because I would give it again, freely, with full knowledge of the cost. But I need you to receive it, knowing what it is. That is not an accusation. That is the request for completion. The exchange is not complete until both people see the full size of what passed between them. Ask for the completion. You deserve it. What Lily said before she left, and what happens next week. Lily left at the usual time. She went through the routine, the private goodbye to Beau, the hugs distributed with her characteristic specificity of feeling, the backpack retrieved from beside the door. She paused at the back door. This was becoming her habit, the door pause, the place where the thing that needed to be said on the way out was said. I had noticed that she had absorbed this from the women at the table who did the same thing, and I thought it was one of the more quietly beautiful forms of transmission I had ever witnessed. The 9-year-old learning to use the door the way the adults used it, understanding instinctively that the threshold was the place for the real things. She said, "Dr. Carver, I've been thinking about something." I told her to go ahead. she said. The table is getting bigger. There are more people now than there were at the beginning. Carol, then Sarah, then me, then Norma was always there, but she's different now because of the journal. And Bo has been here the whole time, but he's part of it too. She paused. She said, I think you should invite more people. I looked at her. She said, not a lot more. Just, I think Tuesday should keep growing. Because the bigger it gets, the more people know that showing up is what you do. She looked at me seriously. That it's the thing. She said, also, I think you should tell the people at Tuesday what you told me. About the 400 people dying. About what they reached for. Because the people at this table aren't finished living yet. And they should know what the people at the end of their lives knew, while they still have time to do something about it. I told her that was a good idea. She said, I know. She opened the door. See you next Tuesday. She left. Norma said, the child wants you to expand the operation. I told her I was aware. Norma said, she's right. You have more to give than a table of 4. I told her that was what this channel had been for. Norma said, I know that, but she's talking about the actual table, the actual people. The ones you can look at, and they can look back. She picked up her bag. She's saying the table should be bigger because the love should go further. She paused. She said, she's 9. She already understands the whole thing. Carol and Sarah gathered their things. Carol said at the door, Richard wrote about the table once, before we started coming. He wrote, I hope Carol finds a table after I'm gone. She loves a good table. She comes alive at a table with the right people. She smiled. She said, I found the table. She left. Sarah paused at the door. She said, my daughter wants to know if she can bring a friend next week, another kid from school. She says the friend lost her grandmother last year and doesn't have anyone to talk to about it. I looked at the table, at the 4 chairs, at the space around it where more chairs could go. I told her to bring the friend. She nodded. She left. I stood in the kitchen. Bo came and sat next to my feet. I looked at the windowsill, the fake succulent, the cactus. Both of them from specific people who had walked through this door and brought what they brought and changed something by the bringing of it. I thought about Lily's instruction. The table should keep growing. The love should go further. She was 9 years old, and she already understood the whole thing. In the comments, I want you to do what Lily did. Tell me one door thing. One specific gesture from one specific person in your life who shows up and doesn't know what the showing up means. Name it here. Name the person if you want, or don't. Just name the thing. And then, go tell them. Because the exchange is not complete until they know the full size of what they gave. And next Tuesday, Lily is bringing a friend. A girl who lost her grandmother last year and has no one to talk to about it. I don't know yet what she'll ask, but I know the table will be ready for her. My name is Dr. Edward Carver. I'll see you then.